This is Michael. I'm in the boardroom. It's 8 o'clock. Scott's here with me. Can we have a roll call? Who will do that?
Yes, Davidson,
Here.
Hawkinson,
Here.
Huthman,
Here.
Cortez,
Here.
Lilyquist,
Here.
Sadhu. And do we have Mayor Fleetwood? I'm not seeing him on the list. So I believe we have Donovan, Fleetwood, Lautenbach, and Darwin absent. Thank you.
Is that still a quorum?
It is still a quorum.
Still a quorum. Thank you very much. We will go to, so with regard to the published agenda, there's one additional item, which is the next one. It's a really nice one. This is a recognition of Pat for remarkable services rendered, and Tracy from WISTIP is here to tell us all about Pat's heroism. Tracy?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I can't be there in person with you today, but because I usually like to do these awards in person because I just really appreciate so much meeting our operators who are so heroic on certain days. And I'm going to describe to you what happened on April 29th, and then I'm going to attempt to share the actual video. So I'm hoping that will work out because, of course, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we are here to honor Pat Brown. And on April 29th, Pat was driving his bus and he saw a situation unfold. It was on a very, very busy street. You all will recognize it since you live in the area once you see it. And a toddler runs out into traffic. And I mean a toddler, like maybe 18 months old. I mean, barely walking, in diapers, no parent in sight. And Pat is able to make a parent's worst nightmare okay. And I like to show you how he did that. So I'm going to share my screen with you and show the video, and hopefully this works. Can you see the video? Okay, so before I actually start it, one of the things I would like you to, I mean, there's a lot of screens, and if you're not used to looking at this, you might not know where to look, but you want to look up here in the street side rear, and that's kind of in the area where you're going to see a child. Pat's down here driving his bus, and he's got a couple passengers on board, and you can see this is a very busy, I think that you would call this 5 lanes, 2 lanes each way and a median lane in the middle. So here we go. Okay, can you see the child? There is a little child there. It's right in front of the white truck. You can see the white truck is attempting to do something about, oh goodness, but now it's out here in traffic. Other people don't know what's going on. But look at Pat. Oh, Pat sees it. He secures his bus, takes off his seatbelt. Do you notice his manner? This is what gets me about this video. Look how calm he is. I mean, as a mother, I would be freaking out. My son, who lives up there in Bellingham, is 30 years old. So I'm still freaking out watching this. He stops traffic. Do you see that? See the little kid running around up there? Now watch Pat. That is not the kid's mother, by the way, out there. That is just some other bystander who is also trying to help. And he is able to return the child. And somewhere along this timing, the parents realize this child is gone, and he is able to return the child to what appears to be the child's parents. And you can still see that in that upper screen of 4. So I'll stop that here and get back to thanking Pat. So, you know, we ask our operators to do a lot of things on any given day. And although we do expect them to be really well aware of what's going on sidewalks and things like that, this is something that is very different in nature. And it took quite a bit more effort. I can envision an operator actually being frozen and just watching what's happening. But you notice the demeanor which Pat had when he went out into traffic. This was just him strapping on his little cape and running out there and saving a child. And we thank Pat so much for that, not just from, me at WISTIP as an employee, but all transit community. We thank you, Pat, for being so forthright and heroic that day. And in your honor, of course, we've given you a letter of recognition. And I understand you already received our check for $250. So we really do appreciate everything you've done. So
and I didn't let any dust collect on the check. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was never good at playing that computer game Frogger, so I'm glad the live version worked out.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Pat.
And of course, it goes without saying that all of WTA board, and I'm sure all of your colleagues also very valuable. Thank you. I think we're done embarrassing you. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to point out too that Council Member Frazee was one of the ones that sent us an email letting us know about Pat's actions. So it does have high visibility. We appreciate that.
Thanks, Les. And a note that Mayor Fleetwood has joined us now. We will go to the first action item, which is a public hearing, an open public hearing on our Title VI plan, and then following the hearing, consideration of approval of the Title VI plan. Mary?
Yes. So just for some background, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. So Title VI is part of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and it's intended to ensure that no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participating in, be denied the benefits of, or subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. And so since we receive federal funds, we are required to submit an updated Title VI report every 3 years. And the 2022 updated Title VI report primarily contains updated demographic information from the 2020 census, where we could find it. It's not all updated yet. And while Spanish is the only language that surpasses the 5% threshold that we must by law translate vital documents, WTA does also translate documents as well as bring interpreters to community meetings when we're in places where there may be members of the public that speak Russian or Punjabi. And this is, okay, sorry. And then, so one result of the Title VI report planning process was the creation of a frequently asked questions reference sheet that we made for our frontline workers. And we worked with the CSRs and terminal expediters to generate a list of the most common questions that are asked while at work. And so they now have a piece of paper that has a list of questions. And so, for example, number 3 says, how much does it cost to ride the bus? And so someone who is Spanish speaking can point to number 3, and then the expediter can look at number 3 on the English list and then point to number 4, which says each ride costs $1. So that was just one example of a tool that we helped to create for our frontline workers to help the members of the public who don't speak English or don't speak English well. So that's the background of the plan. And then do I open the public hearing? Or
No, I guess I would open up
Okay.
the public hearing. So I'm now going to open up the public hearing. If there are any members of the public present, you could unmute yourself and I'll recognize you and you can give testimony. Is there anyone here who would like to speak?
Hey, Mary, did we receive any written?
We did not receive any written comments.
I can't tell if
Okay,
anybody on
thank
the
you.
screen too is raising their hand. Okay, I'm going to guess that there are no members of the public here. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I'm not surprised. I think we do a really good job. Thank you, Mary, for highlighting some of those. So the next item is actually take an action, and that action would be, I guess we have to approve that report. Board members?
I'll move approval.
Second.
I didn't catch you the second was, Vicky, did you?
It was Holly.
Oh, Holly, okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to continue to use the virtual procedure I've been using, which is if there are no objections, we'll consider all motions passed unanimously. Are there any objections to the board approving the 2022 Title VI report? Hearing none, that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary. We now go on to citizen communications. Again, is there any member of the public here who would like to unmute and be recognized, or did we receive any written communications recently?
Vicky, have you received any written communications?
No, we haven't.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on. If there's no objection, we'll go on to consider two board actions, items E1 and E2. The first one is consideration of approval of a task order for the Transpo Group for a Bellingham Station visioning study and also increasing the Transpo Group contract amount accordingly. Tim?
Right here.
There you are.
Yes, so staff is seeking approval of the task order for the Bellingham Station visioning study and to increase WTA's on-call planning contract for Transport Group. The amount of the on-call contract is currently set at an average of 230,000 per year, which is a total of 460,000. We're seeking to increase that on-call planning contract to 600,000 to give us some headroom for additional projects that may be coming down the pike next year, as well as to increase the amount to reflect an increase in our zero emission fleet transition study. We received $100,000 from the state, and so we're going to do some additional work around that study, some additional communications. But primarily, this is about kind of informing the board about the Bellingham Station visioning study. The amount shown in the memo there's a typo. It should actually be 89,890. So with your motion, we'd like to reflect that new amount. Again, 89,890. So again, the primary reason is to kind of fill you in terms of that particular project. We're really excited about this project. It starts the first phase of a multi-phase project that hopefully will end with construction in around 2025, 2026. So part of the reason for this particular study is for WTA, along with stakeholders, to explore various transformative ideas at the station. So we started this process in 2016 with looking at expanding the Bellingham Station to increase capacity for future service changes. But as part of this project, we'd like to look at other ideas such as housing, childcare, perhaps a mobility hub, and other transformative ideas in cooperation and with engagement with stakeholders in that downtown area. So the end result of this project will be a vision statement, a list of programmatic elements, and some conceptual renderings. Again, under development with the community. So I welcome any questions or comments you might have, and look forward to your motion on this.
Board members?
All right, I'll make the motion to approve.
Second. Ally.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Scott. Is there any further discussion?
So this is like a 3 or 4 year plan, and this is the initiation of it.
This is the start of a larger plan. So we're starting with vision, the planning element. We'll move on to design and then construction. I would note we also have received an earmark for $5 million construction of the expansion at BTS. So this is a prelude to that. Use of those dollars. Great.
Any further discussion? Okay, we do have a motion before us, which is to approve a task order of the Transpo Group and also to increase the Transpo Group contract amount to accommodate the increased scope and also, as Tim said, to make headroom for additional projects in the future up to a maximum of $600,000, up from the previous estimate, what I think was just under $500,000. There are no objections. I'll consider the motion passed unanimously. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion is passed unanimously. And
Yeah,
the next
I just
item
want,
is
just wanted to say
consideration of
thank you.
approval-
That's just super exciting. I just wanted to say thank you for passing that. It'll be a lot of fun to work on. And I appreciate Tim leading us through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Les. The next item is consideration of approval for the increase to the existing purchase order for 7 40-foot transit buses from Gillig. Who was presenting this one?
Yeah, before I turn it over to Andy to present, I just wanted to make sure it was clear. This is in regards to the 2021 order that went into production already this year. So when you see diesel, this isn't related to the one we just talked about last month, where we've canceled that purchase order and we're in the discussion on prices for the new purchase order for the electric buses. So just wanted to make sure that was clear as we're doing it. These buses are already in order, or actually in production now. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andy.
Yeah, so consideration of approval, as everybody knows, things are getting much more expensive out there. This order was placed in July of 2021. In July of 2022, we had a closed door meeting with WISTA, Department of Enterprise System, and all the state transit agencies, and they are notifying us of increases coming mainly through chassis and other metal, and they are predicting 50 to 70% increases.
50 to 70?
50 to 70%, yes, due to supply chain issues with COVID. And so we have been hit with several of these, but the one we're talking about today is just in regards to Gillig. And so they have sent us their increases. Everybody's using the word force majeure on this, which basically tries to say that our contract is null and void. And so we've discussed this around and around several times in-house. Gillig, is a very valuable partner with us. We buy all of our fixed route buses with them. They're very transparent. So the increase that they are looking for is the $273,000 on 7 diesel buses.
I just supplement about Gillig is they kindly shared this information with us and showed they're not charging any overhead or markup. This is just straight pass through costs that they're experiencing from their suppliers. So we appreciate that and appreciate the fact that they went ahead and still put these buses into order or into production while we're talking through this. So I do believe Gillig is working in good faith on this. They're just at a rough point too.
That's a 6% increase on the contract, which is, considering what you said, probably a reasonable number, even though it wasn't a contract. I guess I bristle a little that we have a contract and they're saying it's null and void for some legal reason. But we still need the buses. And I'll be one to say they're diesel, so they're probably, no, I won't say. So I'll move approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion before us to approve an increase of $273,000 to accommodate the price increases. I think force majeure is usually used for things beyond control, like a tornado hits your plant, right? Acts of God, earthquakes, war. I don't know, I guess this is maybe in a category. I assume the FTA and state officials, everybody's looked at this and everyone has kind of signed off on this is legit. No one's contesting it.
I will.
No.
Yes, that's true. we're buying it off of the state contract. The state has, because it's federally funded, anytime there's a price change, it's considered a cardinal. It's considered a, I'm trying to think of what the word, it's essentially treated like a sole source. So there's additional financial work that goes into it when we have these types of price changes. So we've got everything documented on our end. The state has it documented on their end. I'm confident that, to speak to what Les had said, they're not charging us an overhead. They're not charging us a markup. It is just straight cost.
Any further discussion? Thanks for that, Megan.
The rest of you can't see it, but Andy's body language is he didn't like this.
Yeah, no, this was a tough thing for Andy. Hey, start Andy, and hey, here you go.
Welcome. Okay, well, it seems like this is the way we got to go. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to call the question. If there are no objections, we'll consider the motion passed unanimously to approve the price increase of $273,000 for the 7 buses currently in production.
And if I may, not related to well, kind of related to that, but not part of this diesel, is the 2 electric buses. They've asked for $12,000 more on each of those 2 buses for the same reason. That's within the general manager's authority to sign, but wanted to pass that along to you as well, just as information. Over.
So we'll just round it up to $300,000 then. Okay, hearing no objections, the motion is passed unanimously. The board of directors authorizes approval of the price increase, and the general manager will deal with the other price increase using his existing authority. Thank you. We now come to the consent agenda, which is approval of routine expenditures for August.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you very much. If there are no objections, we'll consider it passed unanimously. Any objections? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. We now go on to boards of reports. Shauna Shipman, you're up first with the financial landscape, which is sort of step 1 in our annual budget process.
Correct. Right. Thank you, Michael. Brian, would you cue up the slides for me, please? And the conversation we just had is a great segue into the conversation of the financial landscape and the economic environment. And what I'm looking to do is just lay the foundation for the production of the 2023 budget. And you'll see some examples in here of the price increases and some of the uncertainty that we're seeing within the country, the state, and our county, and then how WTA is trying to address those within our budgeting process using the information we know now. It will change probably by the time you see this again in October, and I'll be able to highlight some of those differences as we move forward. Next slide, please. This is just our agenda. We're going to talk about the GDP, the consumer environment, employment, housing, interest rates, and then there's a couple slides of takeaways that will summarize all that information for the board. Something we can bring back and refer to as we develop the budget and see those themes echoing in the budget. And then I'll just talk about the next steps and what our calendar looks like through the rest of the year. Next slide, please. So the first thing we'll talk about is the gross domestic product. And this is a measure of the economy and the level of goods and services produced. It has decreased for the second quarter in a row, 6% for quarter 2, and it was down 1.6% in quarter 1. So we're producing less goods and services in the country. What this is an indicator of a potential recession. It's just one of many indicators, but changes in the GDP also indicate the country's overall economic health. And you can see where Q2 of 2020, right, in the height of the pandemic, it dropped significantly and then bounced back up. And now it's just been bouncing along, but it is declining. What this means for WTA is that our current dollars don't go as far. Things are more expensive. It's costing us more to keep the same level of service on the street. And actually to improve or expand service is going to cost more. So we've talked in the past about when we've added hours of service, and a certain number of those hours are just to maintain current service. We would be spending more to maintain current levels of service going forward. And I'm open for questions throughout the presentation. I can't see all of you, so Michael, maybe you can help me with that. And also, if any of my teammates have things that they would like to add, please jump in and help supplement the information.
I have a question.
Yeah, yes.
Seth Fleetwood here. It shows the first and second quarter of 2022 as negative.
Correct.
Isn't that the definition of a recession? 2 in a row?
I think it depends who you ask, Mr. Fleetwood. I think it is one of the indicators. And there is speculation out there, right, that we are in a recession, that we're on the edge of a recession. I think it depends what source you're looking at, but it is a strong indicator. But I believe there's a few other things that really need to happen in conjunction. I think as we go through the rest of these slides, we'll all come up with our own opinion of where we are, where we aren't. But I believe that's debatable when you look at a number of sources.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide, please. So we're going to look now at the consumer environment, and particularly the CPI. And these two graphs show the CPIU for Seattle, Tacoma, and then for the Western region. And actually, there was a little bit more information that came out last night. So I have an update from then, but the CPI for the Seattle region increased 9% in August of 2022 from a year ago. This says that's unchanged for the past 2 months. What we're seeing is those increases are influenced by shelter and gasoline. Food prices were up 10.3%, energy up 31.5%, that driven by the cost of gasoline. And the index for everything else, less food and energy, advanced 8%. And we're seeing similar amounts in the Western region. So again, what we're seeing is everything is costing more for both WTA and our employees, our vendors, our consumers. This is another step in building that building block of uncertainty. Other factors include the war in Ukraine, China. These are lagging indicators. So we see what happens after the effect. And we're going to be going and looking for some leading indicators of what the economic environment is going to look like. An impact from this on WTA is we may see ridership increase if gas prices continue to rise and don't moderate. However, gas is below $4 a gallon for the first time since March. And higher prices sometimes will bring down demand, which will also follow prices. So I think we're in an environment where there is a lot of demand and reduced supply. So suppliers are able to charge more money, and consumers are willing at this point to continue to pay those. Next slide, please. Here's the employment environment for Whatcom County. July unemployment was 4%, which is down from 4.7 in June, and from 6.1% a year ago. The employment in Washington has been stronger than the forecast, with 1,000 people joining the workforce in August, and state unemployment is down at an all-time low of 3.6%. Challenges and impacts on WTA is we're having challenges recruiting and retaining talent. We're having smaller groups of employees apply, smaller recruitments, and also the new leave laws are challenging for WTA to manage our workforce. For example, the new paid family medical leave within the state of Washington. We're seeing other agencies cutting service because of the driver shortages. We've not had to do that. Employees have more choices for employment, and they're looking for higher pay, better benefits, and increased flexibility. So we're having to modulate that with being able to continue to put our same level of service on the street. Vanessa, can I ask, is there anything you want to add to that?
Not unless there's questions, Shonda.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. The housing environment, and we'll have a couple of slides on this, the overall housing environment and then the single family home. Average sale price of Whatcom County was $585,000 last month, which is 7% higher from last year. Rising interest rates have impacted the numbers of homes sold. So we're seeing still a low inventory on the market. Houses are staying on the market a little bit longer. And we're seeing bidding wars and multiple offers declining. Construction is going up in the East and North County, providing buyers some more choices, and rental rates are at historic highs. The construction boom will improve our sales tax receipts. However, it is challenging for employees. There was a report that came out from the Whatcom Housing Alliance, and they actually featured a WTA driver talking about affordable housing and how affordable housing is defined as no more than 30% of household income spent on housing. And with workforce households, that's a household earning between 60 and 120% of the median income. So for example, an employee or a household earning $100,000 could afford a house worth $385,000. It's $175 less than the median sales price and doesn't include dollars for a down payment. One thing that WTA is looking at is transit-oriented development and how possibly our work in that can help impact or look at this housing crisis that we have in Whatcom County.
Shonda, this is Les. If I could just hop in, thank you. So what we're trying to do with these is trying to look at these to help define the problem set and then see where can WTA help with the problems. And so that I appreciate Shonda highlighting that, because that is why one of the reasons why we're looking at how do we better utilize our properties to help with these and drive success and ridership and so forth for WTA, while helping to solve. We're not going to solve, but helping to solve those other problems as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Next slide is our single family housing environment, and the same picture. You're seeing the housing rate or prices continue to increase. Impacts on WTA is we're seeing our employees and our riders are challenged to avoid housing in the city limits. So they're being pushed to live in rural areas, and that leads to longer commute times and a potential increased reliance on automobile travel, single occupancy vehicle travel. The remote work environment encouraged a lot of people to relocate to the Pacific Northwest if you don't have to be in your office to work. Some of those folks came with large cash balances to buy large houses to accommodate home offices and driving up prices. So again, just another piece of the puzzle on how WTA can develop service to meet these needs and what we can do in the future to maybe help this environment.
And one other thing, if I may, is just as it drives folks into Northeast County, that becomes a challenge for us on service as well, to provide that in those more rural areas as development occurs. Over.
Thanks, Les. Okay, next slide, please. The final piece that we're going to talk about today of this puzzle is the interest rate environment. I believe the Federal Reserve Board is meeting today to contemplate another interest hike. There have been two so far, both at 0.75%. Another is expected at 0.75%, and potentially a rate increase up to 1% in December, which would take the interest rate to 4.75%, the largest in 40 years. Many mortgages are tied to this rate, so that it's impacting what the housing environment is doing. And then speculation of this increase caused the stock market to plummet on Tuesday. The Federal Reserve Board's intent with increasing interest rates is to influence higher borrowing costs, and eventually consumers will start spending less. The demand for goods and services will decrease, and then inflation and prices will fall. We're not seeing that happen. And the Federal Reserve Board, their hands are really tied. This is the only lever that they have to pull, is interest rates. And so there's some speculation about how they may need to pivot to try to bring down inflation with another tool besides interest rates. I do not know what that tool is, but they're saying that they'll use their tools, this is quote, forcefully to attack the inflation, but that this will bring some unfortunate costs to reducing inflation, which is paying to households and businesses, but that failing to restore price stability is far greater pain for the environment, for our country. Again, so we're going to have to watch this. I haven't seen if they've increased it today, but that interest rate ripples through the environment of both our home buyers, our consumers, and really the costs of all of our goods. So stay tuned on that one. We'll have an update when we come back in October. And next slide, please. So these two slides are just the takeaway slides. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but they highlight some additional impacts to WTA of the things that we talk about. The number one we have on the first slide is our safety environment. We didn't talk about in these slides, but I know you're all aware of the issues that many transit agencies are having on the buses and our properties with harassment, violence, and drug issues. So one thing you'll see in the budget is we are standing up a new safety and security program internally to create a sense of safety and security both on our properties and on our buses. Number 6 talks about the supplier prices that we've talked about. You can see those increases that Andy mentioned for our bus orders. And we have other vendors looking under contract that are requesting price increases up to 10%. Ridership is still low. Gas prices haven't significantly increased ridership, so we'll be watching that. Next slide, please, Brian. We talked about the remote work and our increased challenges of recruiting and retaining talent. There's 2 jobs available for every person looking for a job. And we have divisions within WTA trying to meet the same level of demand with a reduced workforce. So there's more work expected from each of the employees that we have on staff. So these would be the takeaways I would encourage you to hold on to, come back, and we could talk about how we address those in the budget and how our priorities will try to address some of these takeaways and this uncertainty in the environment. Last slide, please. Okay, so our next steps is we're in the process of developing the draft budget now. We've gone through the initiatives and we'll be working on bringing that draft to Les and the executive team in the next week or so. I've got a presentation to the Community Transportation Group from the COG on October 4th. October 13th, we'll bring the first draft back to the board and request a public hearing for November 17th. Where we'll present a final draft and then request board approval on December 8th. And we're looking for a budget that will continue to align with the priorities of safety, people, innovation, state of good repair, and allowing us to do construction and plan for the future and looking at our innovation issues of BRT, TOD, and microtransit. And that's all I have today. I'd love to open it up for any questions.
Thank you. Can we stop sharing screen or keep people
Yes.
again?
I have a
Yeah.
question. What was
Go ahead.
WTA's historic high in ridership? Was it 19?
Kick that over to Tim.
Yeah, so I'd say we've been in a slight decline until 2019. And so I believe the high was, I'm going to guess, around 2010, 2012. Yeah, so around that time period. So it was briefly after we had Universal Pass program with Western Washington, in which case it increased substantially. And then, so after that period, it's been in a slow decline until 2019.
Thank you.
Just an observation, many public services like transit are counter-cyclical. So in a recession, there are reasons why you might expect a higher demand, which of course is exactly a problem, because that's when we're facing the same pressures. So I don't know, just an unhappy note that rising gas prices will hurt us, but it may drive more usage, which could increase our efficiency numbers.
Just a note on that, we haven't seen, as Sean had mentioned, we haven't seen a ridership increase with these latest gas prices. So it remains to be seen whether kind of will rebound. I think there's some other factors in play too, but typically studies will say that you won't see that ridership increase for about a year after the gas prices, where people are starting to see where it impacts their bottom line and make other choices for transportation. But I think, again, we're in a different environment with telecommuting and other safety concerns, honestly.
Yes, from my perspective, we have healthy reserves. So if we can maintain our current level of service and it requires reserves to do it, I think that would be wise, as opposed to reducing service, particularly with the counter current things that happen with recessions.
And Scott, we'll do a little review and touch in on the reserves and the reserve policy next time also, just for board members that may not be as familiar with that. So we can talk about how we can incorporate that also.
Well, in the short term, I would agree with Scott that we don't want to reduce service, even if it means going into our reserve. But in the long term, and this is for the board less than Tim, in the long term, do we need to adjust kind of how we do business? Because if we're down 60% in ridership this year, okay, that's fine. We might be up 60% next year. But in 3 years, if we're still down 60%, is it because there's been significant changes in the area and how people do transit? So 40-foot buses may not be what we need. We may need smaller, more right-sized. And any company, any commercial company would do something like that. They would right-size their industry. So in the long term, I think it's something that we really need to look at, as well as I think we need a little more partnership, specifically with various communities. And I'll just use Blaine as an example. We have a lot of people that work in food manufacturing in Blaine, and a lot of them don't live in Blaine because there's just no housing. Do we have buses that go specifically from Bellingham, Ferndale to Blaine at the hours that maybe some of these different shift workers work? That's just one example of our needs specifically in Blaine. But in the long term, I really think we need to look at, do we continue to do business as we did the last 30 years, or do we kind of adjust and maybe, pivot a little based on the fact that we may not get that ridership back?
Eric, I think those are all really great points. We do have dollars set aside in the budget for approval to do a micro transit study throughout the county to see what type of options we have for the Linden Hop. Les, I'm sure you might want to jump in here, but Les is really asking us and challenging us to think differently about how we're doing business. Why have we always done it this way, and looking for not only internal efficiencies to build some capacity for our employees, but also to think about how we can do service differently to meet the changing needs of the community. And I think you'll see those things coming throughout the budget, and then also as part of the WTA 2040 plan as that gets implemented.
I think Shonda said it well, that we need to think differently. We need to allocate precious resources to the greatest demands and identifying what those demands are. Business wise, you look at your capacity, capability, and systems and processes, and how do you monitor that to make sure you're allocating resources correctly. And so we're, as a staff, challenging ourselves to look at that, to think differently, and look at different ways of providing that service, and defining what that service need is, as opposed to presuming that it's always a 40-foot bus. So spending more time on what's the problem, how do we solve that problem in a more efficient way. So I'll pause there and see if that, John and I.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple observations. One is that, of course, ultimately, this isn't all on WTA's capacity to be nimble and react to dynamics. It's ultimately fundamentally up to those of us in municipal leadership, because the greatest determinant of demand for increased frequency, of course, is based on land use. And that is very much something that's in the control of a number of us on this call in determining what kind of future cities we're going to have and how we're going to accommodate people and how dense we're going to be. And there's a lot of decisions in that regard that I think are at the moment unknown, but in our control. And it's going to require, depending on one's perspective, some brave political leadership, because it will require transforming what we do with our cities. And of course, if we increase density in the cities, we're all going to have constituencies that don't like it. We're going to have other constituencies that do like it and very much want it, because it's going to be policy action that's transformative and change. And so anyway, I just want to throw out that idea. In fact, it was a WTA, what was her name? Years and years ago when I was running for some office, and there was somebody in WTA, and I sat down with her, and she was the one that shared that notion about the correlation between the basic correlation between frequency and land use. Anyway, so we've got some tough decisions to make around what our cities look like in the future.
Scott?
In terms of ridership, do we know where we've lost it? Is it across the board, or is it like Western, or is it, do we have a choice, right?
Yeah, and that's a very, very good question. In fact, that's something that we're monitoring very closely. Part of the issue we're dealing with is sort of the change in our data structure to try to understand where that loss is coming from. But right now, our perception is it's pretty uniform throughout the system. Western was definitely down last year by about the same amount as other routes that are non-Western routes. Part of our challenge in the planning department is to understand which particular routes and trips are down overall, and trying to get a handle on that. It looks like it's pretty uniform, not exactly the same for every single route. So that's what we hope to do this next year, is to sort of fine tune where that loss has occurred, and then adapt that to the future needs, mobility needs of the community, and then start to perhaps increase in some areas, maybe decrease in other that's less valuable. So we're trying to fine tune based on the data, but it's a little uncertain right now where exactly that's coming from.
And Tim, can I just say one point of clarification? We're not down 60%, we're at 60% of 2019 numbers. So we're down 40%. Just wanted to make sure, give that point of clarification.
Thank you for that. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, Shonda, thanks so much for the presentation. That's context for the budget that's coming up.
You're welcome.
I would just following Seth's observation. I know how to make transit succeed. What I need to do is create urban density and take away parking. If I create Wall Street, you'll get transit. If you need 7,000 people to show up in one building, you will get transit. That's not a plan. We're going now to Les, your general manager's report. You've got 10 minutes. You can use it all.
I appreciate that. I apologize for shutting off my video, but I kept losing the call, so I apologize. From last week, one, we have a WashDOT Green Transportation grant application and work that's due the end of this month, and what we're looking at on that is 6 electric buses to replace the 2009s that would be in the queue. The award time on that isn't until next summer for the 23-25 biennium. By the time you order them and get them, we probably wouldn't get them until late 25. So that gives transmission or zero emission transition fleet plan and plan for infrastructure and grid and those kinds of things as we're looking forward to that. So that's one thing that we're working on. Another thing is on back to school. Western has their move, I believe, and Whatcom Community College is starting soon. We're seeing that Western, most of their classes are going to be in person, but we'll see how that ultimately works out. Whatcom Community College is they're planning for a 60-40 split in person to remote, although registration seems to be driving that, where they're getting a lot of folks who are registering on the virtual but not the in person. So we'll see where that one ends up. And then school districts are underway now. As you know, Youth Ride Free has started. The state law goes into effect 1 October. Ours has already started. So we're also trying to see if there's an effect on ridership on that as well. You know, after school events and those kinds of things when youth can ride free. On the COVID front, we, as you know, we have our emergency management team that has been working since the start of COVID. We're believing that we're nearing the end of that. We wanted to let Western start and Whatcom Community College start and get a couple weeks under there, get about a month of school district just to see where we're headed. But believe we're headed towards ending that incident management team. Which would coincide with the governor's action as well, and ending the emergency declaration Halloween. So that's where we're headed on that. On a very good note, Josh isn't here because he is currently at a Clever Technology Conference, where he was a sought after panelist on cybersecurity. He is a recognized subject matter expert on cybersecurity across transit. And so just wanted to give him a shout out and make sure that the board knew that on the cybersecurity front, we do have a subject matter expert working on this. And then the Disability Rights Washington is, they're having their Week Without Driving Challenge starting next Monday. WTA was one of 15 transit agencies to support that. Whatcom Smart Trips is also a sponsoring agency of that, and wanted to give you a heads up because you'll see some things on social media, thanks to Maureen and Genevieve supporting that effort. And then finally, just as a reminder, the kind of heavy lifts for the board the remainder of the year is the zero emission fleet transition plan. We'll start the discussion on zero fare recovery. We owe you information on that. We'll finish the sustainability plan and then the 23 budget. And now they're implementing things of all that that we'll talk about with security and safety, as Sean had talked about. Jeff's doing a great job trying to work through how do we respond better on that. So those are the big things in front of the board for Q4. And I'll pause there for questions, comments, or concerns. Okay, I guess none. Back over to you, Michael.
Okay, is there any other business?
Not from staff end, sir.
Okay, well, seeing none, that brings us to the end of the meeting. I'm going to now adjourn the WTA Board of Directors meeting for September 15th. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.